For the first time in 10 years, the world couldn't find him. No red carpets. No flashing cameras. No headlines screaming his name in bold letters. Ethan Cole, one of the youngest billionaires on the planet, vanished overnight. It made no sense to the public. Men like Ethan didn't just disappear. They were tracked, followed, protected, analyzed. His life had become a constant performance. Every smile photographed. Every silence questioned. News anchors debated his body language. Bloggers guessed his next move before he even made it. But that night, the lights in his penthouse went dark. Paparazzi had camped outside for weeks. They slept in cars, argued over coffee, and fought for the best camera angle. Rumors were everywhere. Whispers of a hostile takeover. Leaked documents, boardroom betrayals. His engagement had ended suddenly, painfully, and publicly. A woman he thought loved him had loved the idea of him more. His empire was shaking, and Ethan was tired. Tired of smiling when he felt empty. Tired of being valuable but never truly wanted. Tired of people listening to his money instead of his words. So he did the unthinkable. He walked away. Not dramatically. Not with a speech or a press release. He packed a small bag. Left his phone on the kitchen counter. Changed his appearance in the bathroom mirror, barely recognizing himself as he pulled on a borrowed cap and a cheap jacket that didn't fit quite right. He looked normal. The thought scared him and excited him. The elevator ride down felt longer than usual. His heart pounded as if alarms would suddenly sound, as if someone would stop him and remind him who he was supposed to be. But no one did. Outside, the city buzzed like always. Cars honking, people laughing, strangers rushing past with places to go. No one looked at him twice. For the first time in years, he was invisible. Ethan rented a taxi under a fake name. The keys felt heavier than expected when he held them, like they carried a different kind of responsibility. This wasn't a luxury car. No tinted windows. No driver waiting politely with the door open. Just him, a steering wheel, and silence. He drove through streets he had only ever seen from behind glass. Neighborhoods that never made the news. Corners where life happened quietly. Kids playing with broken footballs. Shop owners sweeping dust from their doorways. People laughing without worrying who was watching. Felt real and unfamiliar. As the hours passed, something inside him loosened. The tight knot that had lived in his chest for years slowly began to untangle. No calls came in. No urgent emails. No demands. Nobody wanted anything from him. He didn't know how long he drove. Time felt softer, less sharp. The city lights blurred into something gentle, almost comforting. Then fate waved him down. A woman stood by the roadside, arm raised, rain just beginning to fall around her. She wasn't dressed like someone in a hurry, but her eyes were focused, determined. There was a strength in the way she stood, like someone used to solving her own problems. Ethan slowed without thinking. As she opened the door and slid into the back seat, he caught a glimpse of her face in the mirror. Tired, yes, but kind. Alert. Real. "Thank you," she said, her voice calm but warm. "I've been waiting forever." He nodded, adjusting the mirror. "Where to?" he asked. She gave an address that meant nothing to him. As he pulled back onto the road, Ethan felt something strange. Something he hadn't felt in years. Curiosity. Not about markets or deals or numbers, but about a person. He didn't know her name. He didn't know where this drive would lead. But in that quiet taxi, with rain tapping softly against the windows and the city stretching endlessly ahead, Ethan Cole, the man the world was searching for, felt something shift. This wasn't an escape. It was the beginning of a different life. And he had no idea that the simple choice to stop that taxi would change everything. She ran like the night itself was chasing her. Ethan noticed her immediately, not because she was loud or flashy, but because she wasn't. She stood on the curb with a phone pressed tightly to her ear, shoulders tense, eyes darting between the road and the dark sky above. Her dress was simple, the kind someone wore when they didn't have time to think about fashion. Her shoes were worn at the edges, like they had carried her through too many long days. Her hair was half tied, half undone, as if she'd given up halfway through fixing it. Then she saw the taxi. Hope flashed across her face, quick and fragile. She waved desperately, stepping closer to the road. Please, please stop. Ethan didn't hesitate. His foot hit the brake before his mind could question it. The taxi rolled to a stop. She yanked the door open and threw herself into the back seat, chest rising and falling fast, like she'd been holding her breath for too long. Downtown, she said between breaths. Fast. I'll explain later. Her hands were shaking as she pulled the door shut. Ethan nodded and pulled back into traffic. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The city rushed past them. Streetlights glowing, cars blaring horns, people moving as if nothing important was happening. But something very important was happening. Ethan could feel it in the air. He glanced at her through the rearview mirror. She had turned slightly away, but not enough to hide the tears slipping down her cheeks. She pressed the phone to her ear again, lowering her voice. Yes, I know, she whispered. I'm trying. Please, just hold them off. She listened, then swallowed hard. If we don't get there in 30 minutes, she said quietly, voice breaking, they'll take the company. The words hit Ethan like a punch. His grip tightened on the steering wheel. He didn't know her, didn't know what company she meant, didn't know the story behind the panic in her voice. But he knew that sound. The sound of someone standing on the edge of losing everything they'd worked for. He had heard it in boardrooms, in late-night calls, in his own voice once, years ago, before success had hardened him. The phone call ended. She lowered the device slowly, staring at it like it had betrayed her. I'm sorry, she said suddenly, wiping her face with the back of her hand. I didn't mean to drag you into this. It's okay, Ethan replied gently. We'll get there. She looked up, surprised by his calm tone. You don't even know what this is about, she said with a shaky laugh. Maybe not, he said, but I know what it feels like to run out of time. That made her pause. She studied him through the mirror now, his simple jacket, the cap pulled low, the quiet focus in his eyes. I'm Mara, she said after a moment. Mara Hayes. Ethan, he replied. Just Ethan. Silence filled the car again, but it wasn't awkward. It was heavy, thoughtful. After a few blocks, she spoke. My company is small, she said. Not famous, not powerful, but it's mine. My parents started it. After they passed, I kept it alive. Barely. She laughed softly, without humor. Tonight was supposed to be the night we finally survived. Ethan listened carefully. But someone bigger noticed us, she continued. They want to buy us out. Cheap. If I don't sign before midnight, they'll force it through other ways. That's not fair, Ethan said. She smiled sadly. The world isn't. Traffic slowed ahead. Red lights stretched like a warning. Ethan checked the time. They were cutting it close. He made a quick decision, turning down a side street, then another. What are you doing? Mara asked, panic rising again. Shortcut, he said calmly. Trust me. She hesitated, then nodded. As the taxi sped through quieter roads, something shifted between them. This wasn't just a ride anymore. It felt like a moment suspended in time. Two strangers sharing the same urgency, the same fear of loss. Mara exhaled slowly. Thank you, she said, for stopping. Ethan met her eyes in the mirror. He didn't know why fate had placed her on that curb at that exact moment. But he knew this. Disappearing had brought him here, and meeting her was no accident. What's your name? Ethan asked gently, his eyes still on the road. Mara, she said.
I'm sorry. I know I'm rambling.
You're not, he replied calmly. You're running. That earned a shaky laugh from the back seat. The kind that slipped out when someone was trying very hard not to cry. Mara leaned back, pressing her palms together as if that alone could keep her life from falling apart. The city lights flashed across her face, catching the shine in her eyes. My dad started the company 20 years ago, she began. A small logistics business. Nothing fancy, just trucks, schedules, and trust. She paused, swallowing. When he got sick, everyone said we should sell. that it was too much for a young woman to handle. Ethan listened without interrupting. "But I didn't," she continued. "I promised him I'd keep it alive. I worked day and night, learned everything from scratch. Some months we barely survived." She let out a breath. "Then last year, things finally started to get better." "What changed?" Ethan asked. "We landed a contract," Mara said. "A big one. Could have saved us. But to make it work, I took a loan. Just a short-term one. Or so they said." Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. "They always say that," he murmured. Mara nodded. "The deadline was today. Midnight. One signature is all that stands between us and losing everything." She looked down at her hands. They were still shaking. "If I don't make it," she whispered, "the company gets seized. My employees lose their jobs. People who've worked with my family for years. Some of them have kids. Some have nowhere else to go." Ethan checked the dashboard clock. 11:36 p.m. 24 minutes. Traffic ahead was thick. Rows of red brake lights stretching like an endless warning. Cars barely moved. Horns blared. Drivers leaned out of windows, shouting into the night. Mara noticed his glance. "We're not going to make it," she said softly. Not dramatic, just defeated. Most drivers would have shrugged. Some would have apologized. Others would have blamed the traffic and called it fate. Ethan didn't. He tightened his grip on the steering wheel. "Hold on," he said quietly. Mara barely had time to ask what he meant before the taxi swerved smoothly into another lane. He took a sharp turn onto a side street most people ignored, a narrow road lit by flickering street lamps. "Wait, what are you doing?" she asked, panic rising again. "Trust me," Ethan said. His voice was steady, certain. The taxi sped forward, tires humming against the pavement. He maneuvered through streets like he'd memorized the city, not as a billionaire driven in the back seat, but as someone who truly knew the roads. Mara clutched the seat. "This is illegal, isn't it?" she asked, half terrified, half amazed. "Probably," Ethan said. "But so is stealing someone's life's work." They cut through back streets, empty roads, and shortcuts no navigation app would suggest. At one point, they hit a roadblock of stalled cars. Mara's heart sank. Ethan didn't slow. He turned sharply into an alley. "Ethan!" she gasped. The alley was narrow, shadows closing in on both sides. Trash bins, brick walls. A sleeping cat darted out of the way. Then freedom. They burst onto a clear road. Mara laughed suddenly. A real laugh this time. Surprised. Breathless. "I don't even know who you are," she said. "But I think you might be insane." "Maybe," he replied. "Or maybe I just don't like seeing people lose." She studied him in the mirror now. His calm. His focus. The way he drove like failure wasn't an option. "You're not just a taxi driver, are you?" she asked quietly. Ethan met her eyes through the mirror. "Tonight," he said, "I am." The clock ticked down. 11:47 p.m. They were close now. She could recognize the buildings. The tall glass office tower ahead, glowing against the dark sky. "We're almost there," she whispered, hope trembling in her voice. Suddenly, a police siren wailed behind them. Mara froze. "Oh no. 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 No." Ethan didn't panic. He slowed just enough to pull into a legal lane, steady as ever. The siren passed them, chasing someone else. Mara exhaled shakily. "Okay," she said, pressing a hand to her chest. "I think I just lost 5 years of my life." Ethan smiled faintly. The taxi screeched to a stop in front of the building. 11:55 p.m. Mara shoved the door open before the car fully stopped. "Thank you," she said, tears back in her eyes. But this time they weren't from fear. "I don't know how to repay you." Ethan met her gaze. "Go," he said. "Save it." She ran. As Ethan watched her disappear into the building, something stirred deep inside him. This was what mattered. Not money, not headlines, but moments like this when one decision could change everything. And for the first time since he disappeared, Ethan felt alive. Ethan knew the city like a chessboard. Every street was a move. Every turn a decision. Every second a risk. He didn't drive like someone guessing. He drove like someone who had already seen the ending and refused to accept defeat. He slipped into alleys no GPS would ever suggest. Narrow paths between tall buildings where light barely reached the ground. He turned where other drivers froze, cutting through streets most people ignored because they looked unimportant. To Ethan, they were everything. Mara clutched the seat as the city blurred past the windows. Neon lights stretched into glowing lines. Horns echoed behind them, then faded. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure he could hear it. "Who are you?" she gasped, half laughing, half terrified as the taxi took another sharp turn. Ethan didn't look back. His eyes stayed locked on the road ahead. "Someone who hates losing," he said simply. That answer didn't explain anything, but somehow it explained enough. They shot past a long line of stalled cars, slipping through a side street just before traffic locked completely. Ethan tapped the brakes, then accelerated, timing the green light perfectly. 1 second later, it turned red behind them. Mara let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "You planned that," she said. "I watched it," Ethan replied. Patterns repeat. The clock on the dashboard glowed like a warning. 11:52 p.m. 8 minutes. Her phone buzzed in her hand. She didn't answer it. She couldn't. If she heard another voice right now, she might fall apart. Instead, she whispered, "Please." Ethan heard her anyway. They cut through a market street, empty now except for a few vendors packing up. Ethan slowed just enough to avoid drawing attention, then sped up again once they cleared the area. Mara stared at him through the mirror. Most drivers would have complained. Some would have demanded more money. Others would have told her it was impossible. Ethan acted like impossible was just another word. "You drive like this matters to you," she said softly. "It does," he replied. She frowned. "But you don't even know me." Ethan's voice dropped, steady and honest. "I know what it feels like when time is trying to steal something you love." Mara's throat tightened. She turned her face toward the window, blinking back tears. 11:55 p.m. 3 minutes. The glass office building rose ahead, glowing against the dark sky like a final checkpoint. But between them and the entrance was one last stretch of traffic. Thick, unmoving, cruel. Mara's chest tightened. "This is it," she whispered. "This is where we lose." Ethan shook his head once. "No," he said. He took a risk. He swung the wheel sharply, cutting into a narrow service road that ran alongside the building. The tires bumped over uneven pavement. A security guard shouted something, but Ethan didn't stop. The entrance appeared. So close. The taxi screeched to a stop. 11:58 p.m. Mara froze for half a second, staring at the time. Then she moved. She kicked off her heels, grabbed them in one hand, and bolted out of the car. Her feet slapped against the pavement as she sprinted toward the glass doors. She stopped once. Just once. She turned back to him, breathless, hair wild, eyes shining with fear and hope mixed together. "Thank you," she said. "Even if this works, I'll never forget you." Ethan met her gaze. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. He just nodded and watched her run. The doors slid shut behind her, swallowing her into the bright building. Ethan leaned back in his seat, his heart pounding harder than it ever had during any business deal, any negotiation, any billion-dollar decision. For the first time in years, his pulse wasn't racing because of money, or power, or fear of failure. It was racing because he cared, and that scared him more than disappearing ever had. 2 days later, Ethan Cole returned to his penthouse. The moment his car pulled into the private garage, the world rushed back in like it had been holding its breath. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Headlines refreshed by the second. Billionaire reappears. Where did Ethan Cole go? What is he hiding? Security teams moved quickly. Assistants flooded his phone with missed calls and urgent messages. Board members demanded meetings. Investors wanted reassurance. Everything was loud again. Everything was familiar. And somehow, Everything felt distant, because Ethan's mind wasn't in the penthouse. It wasn't in the boardroom. It wasn't even in the headlines. It was in a taxi, a narrow street, a glowing clock, a girl running barefoot toward a glass building. Mara. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, the city stretched below him like a living map. Just 2 nights ago, he'd driven through those same streets without anyone knowing who he was, and for the first time in years, he missed it. Ethan loosened his tie and sank into the couch, staring at the ceiling. He tried to focus on work, tried to care about emails and numbers and stock prices. But her voice kept returning to him. If we don't get there in 30 minutes, they'll take the company. He reached for his laptop without fully thinking it through. Just curiosity, he told himself. Just to know if she made it. He typed her name into the search bar. Mara Hayes. The results loaded. Then his breath caught. The headline stared back at him. Small firm beats deadline. Saves 300 jobs. Ethan straightened. He clicked the article. The photo filled the screen. Mara standing outside her office building, sunlight catching her face. She looked tired but proud. Her eyes were brighter now, stronger, alive. The article explained everything. How her family-owned logistics company had faced a forced takeover. How a last-minute signature saved it. How over 300 employees kept their jobs because of one decision made just before midnight. Ethan felt something warm spread through his chest. She did it. He smiled slowly, genuinely. Then his eyes drifted to the background of the photo, and his heart stopped. Behind Mara, on a shelf in her small office, was a simple frame. Inside it, a taxi receipt. The date matched. The time matched. The faded ink was unmistakable. His taxi. She had kept it. Not thrown it away. Not forgotten it. Not treated it like just another piece of paper. She had framed it. Ethan leaned back, stunned. Of all the things she could have saved from that night, the contract, the pen, the signed document, she had chosen that. A receipt from a stranger. From a man she didn't even really know. Something shifted inside him. People had thanked Ethan Cole for years. Thanked him with speeches, gifts, smiles meant for cameras. Gratitude had always come wrapped in expectation. This was different. This wasn't about who he was. It was about what he did. He closed the laptop slowly, his reflection faint in the dark screen. For the first time since returning, the noise outside faded. The city lights no longer felt heavy. The penthouse didn't feel like a cage. Felt like a place he had outgrown. Ethan stood and walked toward his closet, pulling out the cheap jacket he had worn that night. It still smelled faintly of rain and city air. He held it for a moment. Then he made a decision. Not as a billionaire. Not as a headline. But as a man who had been seen, truly seen, without money attached. Somewhere in the city, Mara Hayes was rebuilding her company, her life, her future. And she had kept proof that once, when everything was on the line, a stranger stopped. Ethan slipped the jacket over his arm. This time, he wasn't disappearing. This time, he was going back. 1 week later, Mara stood outside a glass building so tall it seemed to scrape the sky. She adjusted her blazer for the 3rd time and took a slow breath. You earned this, she reminded herself. The invitation had arrived 2 days earlier. Formal, unexpected, and slightly terrifying. Private pitch session. A potential investor interested in her company's recent turnaround. No names mentioned. Just an address, a time, and the promise of opportunity. Mara had barely slept since. This wasn't just about growth anymore. This was about survival turning into stability. About proving, to herself most of all, that she belonged in rooms like this. She stepped inside. The lobby gleamed with polished floors and quiet confidence. Everything smelled expensive and calm, like nothing ever went wrong here. A receptionist smiled and directed her upstairs. The elevator ride felt endless. When the doors finally opened, Mara followed the signs to the boardroom. Her heart thudded harder with every step. She clutched her presentation folder, fingers tight around the edges. You can do this, she told herself. Just like that night. One step at a time. She reached the door and walked in. The room was massive, walls of glass, A long table stretching across the center, city views spilling in from every angle. Several people in suits sat quietly, tablets and notebooks ready. Mara took 2 steps forward. Then she froze. At the head of the table sat a man she recognized instantly. Tailored suit, perfect posture, calm authority that filled the room without effort. Ethan Cole. The headlines came crashing back into her mind all at once. Young billionaire, tech genius, media mystery. Her stomach dropped. Her breath caught. "That's him," she whispered without realizing she'd spoken aloud. "The taxi driver." A few heads turned toward her. Ethan lifted his gaze. Their eyes met. For a single, suspended moment the world narrowed to just the 2 of them. Then, he smiled. Not the polished smile she'd seen in photos online. Not the distant one meant for cameras. But the same quiet smile from the rearview mirror. The one that said, "I know." Mara's heart slammed against her ribs. This had to be a mistake. She blinked, half expecting him to vanish, to turn back into the anonymous driver she'd imagined. But he didn't. He rose smoothly from his seat, every inch the powerful man the world knew. "Mara Hayes," Ethan said, his voice calm, warm. "Thank you for coming." Her legs felt unsteady as she nodded. She stopped, trying again. "I didn't know this was you." A soft ripple of curiosity moved around the table. The other executives exchanged glances. Ethan tilted his head slightly, as if to say not yet. "Please," he said, gesturing toward the chair across from him. "Have a seat." Mara obeyed, her mind spinning. The taxi, the receipt, the shortcut streets, all of it replayed with new meaning. The man who had risked traffic tickets, taken impossible turns, and refused to give up, was this man. The presentation began, but Mara barely remembered starting it. Somehow, muscle memory took over. She spoke about logistics, growth plans, rebuilding trust, and lessons learned the hard way. As she talked, she noticed something strange. Ethan wasn't checking his phone. He wasn't whispering to advisors. He was listening, really listening. When she finished, the room was silent. Then Ethan leaned forward, folding his hands. "You said your company survived because someone gave you a chance when time was against you," he said. "What would you do if you were the one giving that chance?" Mara didn't hesitate. "I'd protect it," she said. "Not just the business, but the people. Because numbers recover. People don't always." Ethan's smile deepened. "That," he said, "is exactly the answer I hoped for." The meeting ended shortly after. The others filed out, murmuring softly. Mara gathered her papers, still dazed. As she turned to leave, Ethan spoke again. "Mara, could you stay a moment?" Her heart skipped. When the door closed behind the others, the room felt quieter, more personal. She faced him. "You knew," she said. "It wasn't a question." "Yes," Ethan replied honestly. "The moment I saw the receipt." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "I thought I was losing my mind when I saw you just now. And I thought I was," he said. "When I realized fate had a sense of humor." They stood there, billionaire and business owner, taxi driver and passenger, no longer pretending. 2 worlds colliding. And neither of them was ready for what would come next. "I didn't lie," Ethan said quietly once they were alone. The boardroom felt different now. Less intimidating, more honest. The glass walls still showed the city below, but the noise felt far away. "I just didn't tell you everything." Mara crossed her arms, trying to steady herself. Her emotions were tangled. Shock, hurt, confusion, and something else she didn't want to name yet. "You let me think you were just normal," she said. The word slipped out before she could stop it. Ethan didn't flinch. "I wanted to be," he said honestly. "And with you, I was." That made her chest ache. She turned toward the window, staring at the city. Cars moved far below like tiny lights, unaware of the storm inside her. "You know how that night felt to me?" she said softly. "I was drowning. Everything I loved was slipping away. And you were just there. No titles. No power. Just someone who cared." Ethan nodded slowly. "That was real," he said. Every second of it. Then why hide? She asked, finally facing him. Why let me find out like this? In a boardroom, in front of people who treat you like a legend? Because the world treats me differently, Ethan replied. The moment they know who I am, they stop seeing me. They see what I can give, what I can fix, what I'm worth. Mara swallowed. I didn't want that with you, he continued. I didn't want you to hear my name and suddenly measure every word. I wanted one moment where I wasn't Ethan Cole, billionaire. Just Ethan. A guy behind a steering wheel who hates losing. Silence filled the room. Mara thought of the receipt, framed on her shelf. The memory of Rain. The way he'd said trust me like it was a promise, not a command. You could have told me afterward, she said. At least then it would have been my choice. You're right, Ethan said immediately. And I'm sorry. That caught her off guard. Not excuses. Not defenses. Just regret. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder, placing it on the table between them. I'm not here to rescue you, he said, or control your company, or turn your story into a headline. He slid the folder toward her. I'm offering a partnership. Mara frowned slightly but opened it. Inside were clear terms. Fair ones. Growth funding.
No hidden clauses.
No takeover language. Her company stayed hers. Decisions stayed shared. This isn't charity, Ethan said. And it's not pity. It's respect. She scanned the pages slowly. And if I say no? She asked. Then I walk away, he replied. No pressure.
No consequences.
I'll still be grateful for the night you let me be invisible. Her throat tightened. She closed the folder without signing. I don't trust the billionaire, she said honestly. Not yet. Ethan nodded, accepting it without argument. But, she added softly, I trust the driver. She met his eyes. The man who raced midnight for me. The one who didn't ask for anything back. Ethan let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Then let me earn it again, he said.
No disguises. No shortcuts.
Just truth. Mara considered him. This time not as a stranger. Not as a legend. But as a man who had shown up when it mattered. She reached for the folder again. Okay, she said. But we do this my way. Ethan smiled. Not like a billionaire closing a deal, but like a driver grateful for a second chance. Deal, he said. And for the first time since their worlds collided, the truth didn't push them apart. It brought them closer. They spent weeks working side by side. Not in front of cameras. Not under flashing lights. Not with reporters waiting outside doors. Just work. Real work. Mara insisted on it.
No announcements.
No press releases. No one needed to know who was funding what or why. She wanted the company to grow quietly. Strong roots before tall branches. Ethan agreed without argument. So he showed up like everyone else. Coffee runs in the early mornings when the office lights were still dim. Late nights with empty cups and messy notes spread across the table. Shared laughter when something finally worked after hours of frustration. Sometimes they forgot the time entirely. Mara watched Ethan closely, not out of suspicion, but curiosity. Without the boardroom spotlight, he was different. Softer. He listened more than he spoke. When he talked, it wasn't about himself, but about ideas, people, possibilities. She saw the man behind the fortune. The one who flinched when praise came too easily. The one who smiled most when no one was watching. The one who worked hardest on problems that wouldn't make headlines. Ethan, in return, saw something in Mara he hadn't expected. She never asked what he was worth. Never hinted at lifestyle upgrades or connections. Never once tried to impress him. She cared about her team, about her drivers and coordinators and warehouse staff. She remembered names, asked about families, celebrated small wins like they were miracles. To her, success wasn't about looking powerful. It was about protecting people. One evening, long after most of the staff had gone home, they sat on the office floor with their backs against the wall, eating takeout from shared containers. Did you ever think this would be your life? Mara asked suddenly. Ethan smiled faintly.
No.
I thought money would fix everything. And? She asked. And it didn't, he admitted. It just made the quiet louder. Mara nodded. I get that. I thought if I worked hard enough, fear would disappear. Did it? She shook her head, smiling.
No.
But I learned to move with it. They locked eyes for a moment. Something unspoken passed between them. Not fireworks. Not drama. Just understanding. A few nights later, after another long day, they stepped outside together. The city hummed softly, streetlights glowing like distant stars. Parked at the curb was a familiar taxi. The same model. The same worn seats. Different night. Ethan stopped walking. Mara noticed and followed his gaze. That night changed everything, she said quietly. He nodded. She turned to him, the city breeze tugging at her hair. You saved my business, she said softly. Ethan shook his head. No, he replied. You saved it yourself. She smiled but didn't look convinced. He stepped closer, his voice just as quiet. You saved me first. Mara frowned slightly. How? I had everything, Ethan said. But I was disappearing. I didn't know how to stop. That night. You reminded me who I was before the world decided who I should be. Her heart raced. You didn't see a billionaire, he continued. You saw a person. And you trusted him when it mattered. Silence stretched between them. Not awkward. Intentional. Ethan reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. His hand found hers. No price tags. No expectations. No promises wrapped in money. Just two people standing beside a taxi, choosing each other without needing a reason. And for the first time in both their lives, love felt simple and priceless. The paparazzi eventually found out. They always do. It started with a blurry photo taken from across the street. Ethan and Mara walking out of a quiet cafe, laughing about something only they understood. Then came another picture. And another. Soon there was no stopping it. By morning, the headlines exploded. Billionaire dates small business owner. Who is Mara Hayes? Power couple or publicity move? Mara's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages from strangers. Requests for interviews. Opinions from people who had never met her but felt entitled to judge her life. Some were kind. Many were not. She tried to ignore it. But it followed her everywhere. Cameras appeared outside her office. Reporters waited near her apartment. Her employees started whispering, not out of cruelty, but concern. Are we going to be okay? One of them asked her gently. Mara smiled and nodded. But inside, she felt like she was shrinking. This wasn't the life she wanted. She hadn't fought so hard to save her company just to become someone's headline. That evening, she sat across from Ethan in his penthouse, the city glowing behind him like a painting. Normally, the view inspired her. Tonight, it made her feel small. I didn't sign up for this world, she said quietly. Ethan studied her face. He could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the weight she was carrying. I know, he said. I didn't want fame, she continued. I didn't want opinions. I just wanted to work, to build something real. Now everything I do feels watched. Tears gathered, but she refused to let them fall. I don't know if I can do this. The room was silent. Ethan turned away from the window and faced her fully. Then we won't, he said simply. She blinked. What? We'll build our own world, Ethan said. One that doesn't belong to them. She searched his face, unsure if she'd heard him right. This world has rules, she said. It will follow you anywhere. Only if I let it, he replied. The next morning, the news broke again. But this time, it wasn't about romance. Ethan Cole steps back from public role. Billionaire declines high-profile events. A strategic move or a personal one. Ethan canceled appearances, declined interviews, handed over day-to-day operations to trusted teams. He didn't disappear completely, but he stepped out of the spotlight that had defined him for years. Again. But this time not to hide. This time to stay present, to stay grounded, to stay with the woman who had chosen him without knowing his name. Mara watched it all unfold, stunned. You didn't have to do this, she said when they finally had a quiet moment. Yes, I did, Ethan replied. Because this is the first time I know exactly what I'm choosing. They took walks without cameras, early mornings, late evenings. They learned which streets stayed quiet and which cafes didn't ask questions. They laughed again, breathed again. The world still watched from a distance, but it no longer controlled them. One night, standing under a streetlight, Mara squeezed Ethan's hand. Thank you, she said, for choosing me. He squeezed back. I chose us, he said, and in that choice they found something rare. A life built not on attention, but on intention. A year later, Ethan drove a taxi one last time. Not because he had to, not because he was hiding, but because he wanted to remember. The night air was calm, warm in a gentle way that made the city feel kinder. The taxi hummed softly as it rolled through familiar streets, its headlights cutting through the dark. Mara sat beside him in the front seat, not in a hurry, not watching the clock, just smiling. They laughed about small things, the way the radio played the same old song twice, the memory of that first night when everything felt like it was about to fall apart. You nearly scared me to death, Mara said, shaking her head. I thought we were going to get arrested. Ethan chuckled. Worth it. They passed the streets where it all began. The corner where she had waved him down, panic in her eyes. The alley he had taken when time was running out. The glowing building where she had run barefoot toward her future. Same city, different lives. Mara leaned her head back, watching streetlights pass overhead. Do you ever miss it? She asked. The running, the disappearing. Ethan thought for a moment. I miss who I was becoming, he said, but I don't miss being lost. She nodded, understanding more than words could explain. The taxi slowed at a red light. A group of teenagers crossed the street, laughing loudly, unaware of who sat behind the wheel. No one pointed. No one stared. Ethan felt free. They talked about everything they had built over the past year. Her company had grown steadily, strong, careful, honest. His life had changed too. Less noise, more meaning. They had learned how to argue without hurting, how to listen without fixing, how to choose each other every day, even when the world tried to pull them in different directions. The taxi turned onto a quieter road. Ethan glanced at Mara. She looked peaceful, happy. He parked the car gently by the curb and turned off the engine. The sudden silence wrapped around them like a blanket. He turned to her. Where to? He asked. Mara smiled. Not the rushed smile from that first night. Not the tired one from fear. This one was calm, certain. Home, she said. Ethan's chest tightened. Home wasn't a place anymore. It wasn't a penthouse or a boardroom or a city skyline. It was this moment, this woman, this choice. He reached for her hand, and she squeezed back. For the billionaire who once escaped the world, who had everything but himself, this was the most valuable destination of all. And this time he wasn't disappearing. He had arrived.